As soon as we get live, I do introductions and then you introduce yourself, all right? And then we wait for people, Katie, in case somebody else join us.
Okay.
And yeah, we live. Perfect. Perfect. Let me put this out. We live. That's great.
Hi.
Hey, this is the Northfield Festival, Sweden. As you guys know, we also have one in New York and next year. And Katie, one of the organizers from New York, she's right here. And then we're gonna leave David to introduce himself. The one and only David. How are you?
Well, salute to you. So, hello, my name is David Jenkins. I am a screenwriter. I live in Salem, Oregon, originally from California. We are transplants. My wife and I moved up to Oregon right before our first child was born back in 2001. So that was a very long time ago. But yeah, so we consider ourselves Oregonians.
Nice. Hey, David, we're very happy to have you. Thanks for joining us for this.
Sure.
We try to, try to get every filmmaker engaged, as much as we can because this is an online festival. And, whoever join us, we just go with the flow. This is
Yep.
filmmaking, even if it's a festival or not. David, you have this beautiful word, Salem, right? Did I pronounce it correct?
Yeah, it's like Solum. I mean, I
Salem, yes.
initially submitted specifically just because this was a film festival in Sweden, and it seems lately everything I want to write um, is in Sweden. So I lived in Sweden many, many years ago, and so
Oh,
my
where?
man, I was all over the place actually. So I lived in Sweden. Geez, that was like 35 years ago. So I was originally south of Stockholm. I
Mm-hmm.
was like in
Cool.
Södertälje, and then I went over to
So
Skövde.
Italia?
I was in Skövde and Skaraborg, and then I went up to Bollnäs and Hälsingland, and then I went out to Göteborg. So I was in Sweden for 2 years. So in my
Oh,
younger and
wow.
more vulnerable years, I was a missionary, and so I was a terrible missionary. I couldn't speak the language. I converted no one. Sweden kind of converted me. So, I'm no longer part of the faith, but like my years in Sweden and just the culture, the language, the history, the media that's from Sweden, the movies and music, it always kind of drew me.
Hmm.
And so I've been writing, geez, I've been writing scripts since 2003 and in earnest,
Oh,
but
wow.
um, the stuff that I just want to write right now is just looking at quirky stories in different places that I'm familiar with, and location is always a big
Hmm.
draw for me. So that's why I wrote Salem or Solem, which is a suburb of Stockholm. It's a small town in the near Tumba, near Runinga, and there's some fascinating history
Near
there.
Tumba?
Yeah,
Oh, wow. No,
yeah,
I've been here for quite long. I didn't know that a place. I live in Vällingby, Hässelby. I don't know if you know.
yeah. So
Uh,
we were just
yeah.
in Stockholm over the summer for my daughter
Oh,
graduated
yes?
from college, and so we
Wow.
took her and her boyfriend, and so we spent a week in Helsingland and then a week in Stockholm. But I wrote the
Oh,
script.
nice.
I wrote the short script whenever I have ideas like features to write. It's always
Hmm.
nervous to kind of go back to that creative well. Like, do I still have it in me to bang a script out? And so features can sometimes be intimidating. And so I like to write
Hmm.
shorts in between just as a means of like, yeah, I still have this. I still have this creative voice. And Solemn or Salem, the short script, was kind of one of those interim scripts. But it's very location specific. My manager hates when I write
Hmm.
very location specific scripts because they're like impossible to sell. And um, but I've played the game where you try to write something that's marketable and that's high concept, and it's writing will break your heart, and this industry will break your heart. And so
Oh.
right now, the only thing I do is I write for an audience of one. And if that one
Hmm.
person is just me and it makes me happy, so be it. Um,
Hey,
but
that's the
really
spirit. That's it.
but But really, when you are writing for an audience of one. You're writing for that reader, that producer, that director, that person to build a connection to get them excited. And so I think that way. And so when I write, I'm just writing for an audience of one because I know whatever eventually gets made will change and be rewritten
Right.
and it will morph into something different. Because
True.
filmmaking is collaborative.
Correct. So we are gonna jump very quick to Avril, right? Am I pronouncing it right, the name Avril?
Yes, perfectly. And I'm so sorry I'm late. I was jumping from a work meeting, so I apologize.
How can you be late? Come on.
There you
Hey,
go.
listen, too soon, huh? You also have this. Anyways, we are live actually now in YouTube, so we're just making kind of things ready. So this video will be ready right away. Uh, Introduce yourself, Abril, and tell us a little bit about the too soon. All right. So we have David right there. David just write this beautiful word, Salim. Then yeah, go ahead.
Wonderful. Hi, my name is Avril David. I love to write. I recently wrote a short screenplay called Too Soon. Essentially, the premise is, what if, when things got really bad on Earth, things were horrible elections or, terrible wars, lots of bad things going on. What if there were people who made a pact that they would go to the other side and help us on this side? Whenever we were close to the brink of things totally ending. And so I had this idea in about 2016 when a lot of things were going on in the news and some major kind of legends and icons all passed away at the same time. So it was a very difficult and sad time. And they happened to be amazing legends with incredible talents. David Bowie, Stephen
Mhm.
Hawking, Carrie Fisher, um, Prince. And so my idea was that on the other side, in this alternate parallel reality, they use their powers of art and music and physics to save the planet. So it's a very kind of, it's called Too Soon because, I feel, we lost them too soon. The last
Mhm.
words in the screenplay are actually too soon as well, not a moment too soon. And yeah, it's a bit it's eccentric. I call it reverent, not irreverent. Even though it's funny, it's very much kind of a lot of love for who these people were on Earth. And yeah, that's the story. And if it's helpful in my day-to-day life, I often I work in technology, so I'm very big into sci-fi and tech and all these sorts of things, and that
Mhm.
influences my writing. It always is a little bit different, real world plus sci-fi plus dreaming and all sorts of things. So yeah.
Nice, beautiful. So let me start with the yeah. Thank you, both of you. You made it to our meeting here, which is the point. Is the later I can be in contact with you, Avril, with David too. You never know. We also have a couple of festivals all over the place, and networking is key in this industry. And we just one, two contests away for big things actually. Guys, how do you start the script? Too soon in Salem. Do you build a whole idea? You start, just writing, let's say one page, one treatment, and then you start from there. You start with the beginning. You more or less guess the middle and the end, or you just go with the flow. How is the process for each of you? I'm interested, very interested in that kind of process because it's so different for each writer. Can you guys share that with us?
Sure, I'll be happy to jump in real quick. So I'm a bit all over the place. I get kind of obsessive compulsive when I write. And so like when I really commit myself, um, I just go for it. And as long as I have the
Yeah.
bookends, I know how it starts. I know the ending. I know the certain beats I need to hit. Really the hardest part for me is coming up with character names. Like character names, like you want something that's brilliant. Like you think about some of the character names out there, like, Don Draper. You think these names that are so iconic. And like I always struggle with that. And so like I look at old yearbooks, I look at like employee directories of past places where I've
Mhm.
worked. And so or variations of different names. And every now and then I'll hear a name. I'm like, that's a brilliant name. I need to write that down because I'm going to use that someday. And so um, for me, like characters, they come to life when I really put that much energy into it. But for Salem or Solemn, when I wrote that, I spent a lot of time on the internet. That's an area I was familiar with, but Google Earth is every writer's favorite tool to like go on the street view to really immerse yourself in the history, in the location when you have something that's location specific. And so I enjoy that, but I jump in and I just bang it out. And I can write messy, but I also write fast. And so that's why I do a lot of rewriting. That's pretty much my process.
What about you, April?
Yeah. So kind of similar to David's in that I tend to have like a very strong idea that I can't get out of my head. And I know this is what I want to write about. Very recently, I just started working on a screenplay that's like a modern day retelling of Rip Van Winkle. And I just couldn't get this idea out of my head. And in terms of completing it, I do put together a loose outline. So just understanding, okay, what are the beats and what's the ending? So I have that overall framework and then just fill it in. Along the way, I feel like organically, characters and situations and scenes, even though they're somewhat outlined, they still evolve while I'm writing. So sometimes I don't realize that I'm going to do something until I do it. And then I'm like, oh, that worked. And then I keep going. Or that was funny, or ask someone else if it's funny just to, make sure. Yeah. So that's kind of my process as well. Yeah.
It's actually cool that you're working on a Rip Van Winkle because I've always had an idea for a modern day Rip Van Winkle.
Really? We
Yeah,
should
no,
talk.
but like I just think it's well, I mean, just the idea of where society is moving in the future and just like someone, yeah. But like it kind of also plays similar themes of what you're short too soon, about
Yeah.
someone from the past maybe saving where we misstepped and went the wrong way. So I it's nice to see you're playing on familiar themes.
Cool. You get it. Yay. Very cool.
I wanted to
What
ask,
yeah, go ahead, Katie.
no,
Yeah,
no,
go ahead,
no,
yeah.
go. Well, I wanted
All
to
right.
like, where do you get your inspiration from? Like, do you like see it from a movie, from a like where do you guys get the inspiration to do what you love?
For me, I'm
question.
just a really weird person. So
Isn't that
Come
great?
on,
It's a
man.
good call.
I have like really weird thoughts and screenwriting is the only way that I can, somewhat survive in society when you have crazy story ideas. So it's but yeah, it's inspiration comes from everything. It can come from the workplace. I too work in IT, and so I also work in the public sector and working with government and just being in an office and being around that culture of how that's evolved. And then with AI, there's inspiration everywhere. And I think every writer who kind of you're born with that gift and you just and even if those stories only make sense to you, like you never know until you really like you never know until you type fade in and start typing. Like whether that's going to go somewhere. And sometimes it's just a writing sample and it's just for you, but it's at least something that you accomplish.
I like the approach you have, David. It's pretty cool. I think I made films too, Katie, how we gotta do films for ourselves, even if we are the only ones who are gonna watch our films, because yeah. So that's a beautiful approach. That's a nice approach, David. Definitely, I'll share with you. What about you, Avro? About what Katie says? I'm Darwin, by the way.
Yes, I know you.
Who don't know Darwin?
Come on. Yeah. Yeah, so in terms of inspiration for stories, I like being inspired by real life. So like events in the news, something that, happened to me the other day, a time when I was studying abroad in England or something, like that was the core of one of my stories. And it then, it always has to have some kind of twist though. So it's like something real with a slight change to it. So for instance, when I was studying abroad, I was in this small town called Ottery St. Mary, close to Exeter University. And I remember there was a local pub and people were having the best conversations. I was like eavesdropping, just like listening to what they were talking about. And I had this twist on what was really happening. Like, what if this was like a dream sequence and people were coming and meeting each other and they were actually different aspects or elements of one person's thoughts and memories, and they were interacting with each other in this bar? Because there were some really heavy conversations happening. I was like, something's being worked out here. So I loved that idea, but it was inspired by just being in a bar, being in a pub.
Interesting.
That's just everyday kind of thing. Yeah. So I really like a twist on reality, I suppose. And sorry, Darwin, you said something and it reminded me of about a book on screenwriting that I was reading. Like you said, to make films for yourself. There was an author who said, you should try and write so that it changes your life. Because even if nobody else sees it, you'll have already changed your own life. So if it's something you
Yeah.
believe in or something you think is really exciting or interesting, just write it. And hopefully others
Correct.
get it. And if they don't, you win anyway. So it's okay.
When was
Correct. That's
Oh,
what David says. Yeah, exactly. And I'm a
yeah.
true believer because we just expecting to hit the big money with something, and we just over that thought, of creating something for gaining something, right? Which is at the end of the day is what we do. We want that too, but that's not really the final route, I think, and that's something I like when David started saying, actually start that. Guys, let me ask you this question: do you write? You need to be inspired, or you just force yourself to write? Tell me that.
It kind of depends if you have a writing assignment, because I have done writing assignments and I have one where a director I've worked with in the past, he did a short that was really successful and he sent me a script and like the script needs so much work, and like it and you don't really feel the material. And even if there's a little bit of money attached, I like when I was a starving artist in between jobs, you would jump at anything. But like when you have a good job with good benefits, you can kind of pick and choose. And I know right now it's really hard for a lot of writers. And so you don't want to turn down work, but you really you need to feel something. You can't force it. And I've done gigs where you don't want to just phone it in because your name's somewhat attached to it, or at least even if not the end product, it's attached to it. It's still you're putting your time and energy into something. And so for me, that's like when you don't feel it, that's the ones where you really have to push yourself to write. But I give myself a lot of grace. I don't believe in writing every day. When I have stories
Hmm.
brewing in my head, to me that is writing. And always, sometimes my wife will be like, "You're quiet. What's going on in your head?" And you're like, I have like five different stories that I'm kind of like, percolating in there to see which ones I want to jump on. Because like I'm not a young buck. I'm like an old dog. And so I know that I just have I have a limited amount of, scripts. I've written like 25 features and like dozens of shorts. And so, you know, when
Wow.
I say that number,
Congratulations. That's
people
awesome.
are like, "Oh, that's impressive." And they're like, "Well, why haven't you made it yet?" It's like, because it's a tough business.
Obviously.
I still qualify
Mhm.
for fellowships because I haven't earned enough as a writer. And so I enjoy it as a hobby. So so yeah, I don't believe like you write every day. If you have a story in your head, you're writing. You're plotting it out, and that's still doing the work.
What about you, Averill? What's your approach in that question?
Yeah. So because I also write only what I enjoy writing, I get into kind of a state of flow. And to me, writing is my joy. I really, really love it. And, so I have my day job, which takes care of everything. And, I like that too. But writing is where I would really love to see myself like doing this if I could oh my gosh, I'd be so happy if I could do it full time. So for me, I do like to write every day. Um, Even if I don't have something that's, kind of like at top of mind, I'll just kind of start. And then next thing you know, things are flowing out. And so it might be a project I've already started, or it might just be a new idea. And then I just have a page of ideas. But I do like to write every day. Yeah. So I would say I get into a state of flow, and it's flow driven by love, I suppose, because it's so much fun. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Nice. You see, it's pretty much the same feeling, both of you. What about the rewriting? Do you do it very much, or you're sometimes you're happy right away because this is so, how do you say, it's so singular, it's when you hear writings, they just write one future film and no more rewritings, only maybe one, and then they get an Oscar, and it's so weird how the industry works, and the other people that write for 10 years, it's what about for you guys?
Well, one, don't ever trust the credits on IMDb, because like that doesn't dictate a writer's career. There are
That's
successful
correct.
working writers in the WGA who
Hmm,
don't really have any credits or maybe just have a few. And it's
true.
because, writing gigs, you can work on something and make a living, but it never gets made. And so, but there is
Mhm,
still like for places that have development money, things like that, or maybe
mhm.
a rewriting gig. But yeah, I look at it that, I tend to write scripts and then let them kind of sit, like I'll do some polishing, but I'll let it sit and I'll give myself some space away from it. And then when I look back at it, I'm like, oh my God, this thing's 110 pages. That's terrible. I need to shave this down. This is a horror thriller. It should be in the 90-page range. I'm like, what was I thinking? And so when you give yourself 6 months or whatever, you go back with fresh eyes and you can see all the problems. And if I were to do that immediately after I typed fade out, I'd be like, no, this thing's perfect. I can't take any of this stuff out. And so I always look at scenes, in late, out early. And so you get into the scene as absolutely late as possible and you leave as soon as you can because you just want the bare minimum and you want those beats to move and you want the reader to be engaged. And if and for me, I just did a rewrite on a script that again, it was like 110 pages. It was a horror script. And I'm like, what, this is terrible. And I shaved, you know, 13 pages off in one pass. And so I felt really good about that. And so for me, I just need to give myself time in between, um, for the rewriting to work.
Right. April, what about you on
Yeah,
that?
I agree that time is definitely important. Some time and distance from what you've written. And also just tons of feedback. So usually, I'll write something sometimes fairly quickly. And when I feel like it's in a pretty good space, I'll share it with someone. So friends, family first, you know what I mean? Just like, hey, did this make you laugh or did this make you cry or, that sort of thing. Did it actually elicit the emotion that I was trying to go for, or does it only make sense in my own head? In which case, I'd probably completely rewrite it. But if I'm starting to get some positive feedback, make a few tweaks here and there, then after that, what I decided to do with Too Soon was to start to enter it into some festivals and competitions and, to
Mhm.
see what kind of reaction it was getting. And so, once my, core base of people are like, yeah, you should try and do something with this, then I move it forward. And if they're telling me to stop, then I really rethink what I'm doing. I trust their opinions, and
Yeah, I was
also
gonna
I
say,
trust the opinion. Yeah, and festivals too. Like if I'm getting lots of no's or something, then that's a big sign. And yeah, that
that's
maybe it
good.
needs to be reworked.
What what about guys the when you create characters, right? Like you, for example, David, Father Mikhail, which is a very Swedish name actually.
Yeah.
Auntie, how do you make them sound know you? This is something very tricky that I found.
Yeah.
Do you this is the trick. One of the trickiest part in writing characters, right? Is just to make them as original they are supposed to be. No, like
Yeah.
we as a. Can you
So,
give me some tips on that?
well, for me, like that short script, it takes place like in the medieval times. So it takes place like in the 14th century
Mhm.
in 14th century Sweden. And so there's this Father Mikael. He is a disillusioned priest. He's seen a lot of pain in the world. And so it opens with him throwing a noose around a beam that he's going to hang himself in Salem Church. And he's
Mhm.
interrupted by a blind boy who knocks on the door. And it's a dark, stormy night. And so that begins a journey for the two of them. And so for me, I generally don't write period pieces, but for me, the language came really easy. I think I was just really dialed in. I think my past religious upbringing, but like just the language and how they spoke, and it just seemed to flow pretty naturally for me, even though it wasn't. Um, I didn't want to spend a lot of time researching dialogue, from because it's a short. This is just something I'm writing on the side, and so it
Mhm.
varies from character to character. But the most important thing is like dialogue needs to be unique. It can't just be the same. Each individual character needs to have their own voice, and that can be a challenge for some writers. And so really just having your key players and giving them unique, specific dialogue that is meant for them to have their own voice. That's a craft that takes takes a while to kind of really perfect. And then also not having dialogue that's too on the nose, because sometimes you have a great line and it's so on the nose it hurts. And you have to pull that back, and you're like, oh, but I love that line. It's such a good line. But it's true. I mean, you look at some of the writing in some of the shows right now, like the studio on Apple. It's the dialogue is so incredible, and you just sit back and be like,
Right.
these people are so good at dialogue. It's amazing, and
Mm.
um, you can't even be jealous over it because you're just sitting on like whoever wrote this, they're brilliant writers, and so dialogue is tough.
True.
Yep.
April, what about you? How
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, so with Too Soon, it was a different situation because I was building off of people who exist. And so just by studying them and reading their books and watching their movies, I reread A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking and watched, Theory of
Stephen
Everything
Hawking, yeah.
and, Prince, Purple Rain, all these things. There's so much to draw on that at a certain point, I was hearing them in my head. I was like, oh my gosh, they would say this. Oh my goodness, if they were interacting with this person, they would say that. And it would be such a cool moment because they're so different. I could hear it. So that was actually an easier process because, they're fully developed real people with real character.
Mhm.
In terms of, so there's another character in Too Soon named Gabriel. And so he's someone who he starts off as a child. He's at a concert and sees them backstage and is very like confused and inspired to become a scientist and create, all sorts of things. I'll spare you all the details. But later on, he interrupts one of their missions because he's now this like kind of lonely, brilliant scientist, and he's, very lost. And I actually built that character from a couple of different people that I know. So like the younger version of him, I was thinking of an old friend of mine named Carlos, who I met when I was in Switzerland. And I remember he's so smart. And he was from Spain, and he was really wanted to go to CERN in Switzerland, that the institute there. And so I built that into his character, that his dad was a brilliant scientist and he left them to go study at CERN, and then he was always inspired to try to be like his father. And so he had this backstory that was partially inspired by someone I knew who also wanted to be closer to his father because he wasn't around and wanted to be a scientist. And so he's not totally that character, but I definitely pulled a lot from him. And so I think real life people sometimes, as long as they're okay with it and you're not taking, them completely, I think they can be the best inspiration, or even aspects of your own personality, things that you think and feel that you don't necessarily share with everyone. You can kind of build that into a character as well. So
Yeah, that's
Right.
good.
Nice, nice. And one,
Mhm.
what about you guys like to, how do you give feedback? How do you is your approach? Do you like to, there are some writers that don't like feedback, and how is that for you guys? Or you open to, because at the end of the day, when you get feedback, they're trying to change what you've been writing, right? It
Yeah.
is truth. So how much you allow that to happen? Because it's a tricky part actually for all of us, also for filmmakers too. So
I think,
David, yes.
yeah, for me, I have like valued friends that are writers, directors that relationships that I've built over time. And so we will share work back and forth. And sometimes their feedback, is spot on. And other times, I mean, it really just depends. Like filmmaking is collaborative. Even if like I have a script that's a contained thriller that's basically kind of been under options since 2011. It's been with different companies, different directors. It's been all over the place. I've rewritten it over 100 times, and you it's collaborative, and that's a script that I've worked on forever. I hope it gets made someday. And then there's another script
Mhm.
that I wrote in 3 days. I stuck it in a drawer. And 2 years later, a director friend of mine was looking for something to shoot with a micro budget. And on a whim, I pitched it to him. And they shot basically one polish away from a first draft, which was
Mhm.
insane. And
Wow.
so sometimes it makes this industry makes no sense, So you can have something that's just a polish or two away from a first draft, or you can have something that's been rewritten hundreds of times. But feedback is essential, unless you are a director and you're a self-made millionaire and you're going to finance everything you do and shoot
Clear
everything
one.
you do. It is collaborative. And some of my best work has come through a rewrite based off of notes from someone else.
Mhm.
And and then those are eventually changed later. And so for me, some of my best writing was 40 drafts ago. That's no longer there, and you just have to realize that it's a living, breathing document. It's not
Mhm.
final. It never is really.
True.
Even in post-production, you're writing new scenes.
That's true. What about you, April?
yeah, agreed that it's a collaborative effort for sure. I love getting feedback. Um,
Mhm.
I think as long as the heart and the message of the story is still there, I can rewrite anything. Like, so I won't take it personally. If it's only funny in my head, then it doesn't need to be there. It's totally okay. Yeah, so I think it's I guess when you first have that premise or that idea, knowing what the point is really important because then that can allow you to stick to it no matter what anyone is saying. And sometimes you'll get feedback. I've gotten feedback at like notes and one person's notes like directly contradicts the other and I'm like, okay, so I know this is just a matter of opinion now, so I'm going to stick with what I did. So so it's nice getting lots of input from different places, so you kind of know how to move forward without losing what really matters to you, I think.
And to add
Just
to
just
all of that confusion now, some competitions, it looks like they're using AI to write feedback, and it's
Oh,
terrible. And it's like,
right?
yeah, or they
Yeah.
might be using AI for their first round of, and like you hate to see that because, competitions they're everywhere. They're a dime a dozen,
Mhm.
and it's, there are some that give feedback, and some people really value that feedback. And if it's being written by a machine rather than an actual reader, I think that's a huge disservice for young writers starting out.
Yeah, that's a good point. You actually brought something very good. Now it's people is just using this to do a lot of stuff in writing, huh? So that's sad and tricky too, huh? Because
Yeah.
I can see definitely I know how's a AI script. Just you just detect it right away, just so obvious. But it is so obvious,
I know.
yes, especially in programming, because the actions they give you, they give to my actions, which we don't do that actually. It's so perfect the
And then
action
it's
that
like
it just
there's
doesn't
no
make
feeling
sense.
behind it. It's just bleh.
So, uh,
Yeah.
what are you guys, what are you seeing with this AI now? Where are we hitting
Well, I
as
think there's always
writers?
been AI to a certain extent, especially in editing and
It's been,
filmmaking. That
yeah, you're,
it's been around for a
mhm,
while with special effects, and so it's just it was never under that blanket term of AI, and so it's all front and center. Where I work in a technical environment, I have coworkers that use Copilot or ChatGPT to,
mhm.
they'll run an email through it to say, hey, make sure, does this sound happy or does this sound
Oh,
professional? And and for me, I'm just like, that's feeding the machine. And like writing is a learned skill, and it's
Big
and
time, big
it's
time, yes.
and like that's where the challenge is like on a recent writing assignment that was a potential writing assignment, the script just felt so formulaic and it felt so lifeless. I'm like, is this an AI script that they now want a real writer to punch up? And if that's where the industry's heading, I mean, I already feel like we're kind of there, and like you have to adapt. I just kind of refuse to
Mm,
feed the machine with my own material and what I do, but like I said, I'm an old dog, so I mean, I don't use uh, I'm not using a typewriter. I do use a screenwriting software, which makes things a hell of a lot easier. But
mhm,
yeah, it is scary, from
mhm.
it's unknown technology, and you want things to stay. It was a hard business to begin with, and it just feels like with AI, it's being more of a challenge now.
Right? Yeah, I agree. What about you, Averill, with this?
I mean, I can understand why certain places might want to use it. Like, for instance, they have so many, scripts that they're receiving and they just want to whittle it down a bit. So their first pass is with, an AI tool or something like that. I
Mhm,
personally don't like that, but I understand it. And if they feel it makes them more efficient and they're able to more quickly get to, the really strong pieces, then I suppose, yeah. I mean, it's things are always changing, right? I mean, like David mentioned,
mhm,
special effects. Like these things have always been here and, kind of changing the game. It's just, I guess,
mhm,
way more prevalent and more in our you know, at the forefront of our minds right now. I will say one thing, like kind of with AI, because it's, so logic based and algorithm based, I think it could potentially be helpful just to like if you run a story through it, just does it make sense? Because I realize like I do that with my friends and family. Like just I need an outside person to just give me just high level, like, did you get it? like if you how would you summarize this? Did it make any sense? So if you ask, like Copilot to summarize a story and it comes out like, okay, they understood it, that could be helpful, I
mhm.
think. But in terms of the actual process of the writing, I want to do that myself. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
if AI could like do a one-page synopsis, because writers hate doing one-page synopsises, but then you don't want it to read like AI wrote it. So like, yeah, that's it is kind of funny. Like you write the script, and then they want like beat sheets and all the stuff that you didn't do ahead of time, because I write differently, and you're like, oh crap, I gotta go back and try
Yeah.
to like write something concise, like nice and pretty on a one page. Yeah, so
Mhm.
it's a funny industry. Everyone's different.
Yeah. Yeah. So very quick, last question, guys. Very simple question, stupid too at the same time, actually. Eh, what is the hardest for you, writing action or dialogue? Which probably will be dialogue, right? What do you think? Both are kind of tricky because I was just checking the Salim. Your action is pretty sure, David. So it's interesting. I like that.
Well,
Also, same for Ariel too.
yeah, I mean, so like it depends. Shorts are just like a conversation. A lot of my shorts
All
are
right.
And so especially, I think it's only 12 pages. I don't even remember how many pages Solemn is, but so
13, 12, yeah, correct. 12.
you try to keep it short and concise, and you want to move the reader.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a feature, like in the last rewrite I did on a horror called Stenfin, it was a quarterfinalist last year in the Nickel Fellowship. I
Mm-hmm.
went back and I knew that there were action beats I wanted to punch up and really, really pop on the page, and I wanted to preserve that space. And I felt that there were dialogue areas that were just that could be trimmed. They weren't necessary. And so for me, action is fun. Action is fun when something you really feel, you want it to pop, you want those bolds, you want that action stacking, you want to move the reader. And so I love writing that. Dialogue, it, you know, I don't, the hardest part is the second act. I mean, really, I start with the script having the first act and the third act in my mind. And that midpoint in the second act where it will make or break a story, that's the hardest part.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Yeah, yeah.
April, what about you?
I'm the opposite. I love dialogue. I love writing it. To me, it just kind of flows. Like once I can see the characters in my head, I'm like, oh my gosh, they would say this. And I know right away what, or at least I feel what they would say. Um, I'm working on action because I think I do need that more. And I've received some feedback that if you lengthen
Mm-hmm.
some of these descriptions, I mean, this could be a feature, it could be really, but I think for me, naturally, the dialogue just flows. But yeah, I want to get better
Mm-hmm.
at action. So I'm going to work on that. Yeah.
And the big key is keeping it sparse. They love white space on the page. They don't want something that's like,
Right.
way back when someone said, don't have more than 4 lines, break it
Mm-hmm.
up, don't have more than 4 lines of dialogue. And that's really hard when you have one character talking for a long time. And so, you know, they love white space on the page. And so I've had to really work hard to keep that.
Yeah, I see you know your stuff, both of you guys. Yes, that's correct. Hey guys, just let's say, yeah, we pretty much because we're gonna continue now with the actors of feature films. Let's say you guys, I think I got you already in Instagram, right, Avril? You follow me, I follow you.
No,
If
just
you guys are
we connected though, Gmail, like just
by
email.
Gmail, right?
Yeah.
Gmail. So if you guys want to share your social media with us, we'll be happy to follow you. Also, we're doing kind of, producing things, in a independent level, but we're doing things there. So I'll be happy to be in contact with you guys because that's the point. Also between both of you, actually, you both are in the US. You never know what can lead. So if you guys can drop your Instagram for me or whatever you guys use if you want to. Otherwise,
Yeah.
totally fine.
Yeah. No, I'm on Blue Sky. So I made the switch after the election. I finally left
You're in
Twitter.
the blues.
So I'm in Blue Sky. But yeah, happy to. And that's the whole reason why this film festival jumped out because Salem is a very specific location. And so I'm looking to broaden my connections with filmmakers and creatives in Sweden or Scandinavia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nice. What about April? Where we can find you?
I don't really use Instagram.
No worries.
I
No
mean,
worries. I'm just asking.
I'm on like LinkedIn, and you can always email
LinkedIn?
me. I'm very open. So
Got it.
yeah.
Yeah.
All
So
right.
my handle is Script Dave. There's another David Jenkins.
Sweet
He's
day.
much more talented and better looking than I am. He's the creator of Our Flag Means Death. So he's on there as well. He's fun to interact with. I hope to one day have a script
Nice.
written by David Jenkins and David Jenkins and David Jenkins because there's a lot of us out there.
Devin Jacobs
So
said,
guys, we are just gonna grab a quick screenshot so for later we can pass to Dana to do our stories. So right here, yes, yeah, this is the North. So guys, thank you so much,
All
for
right.
being here with us.
thank
Thank
you,
We're gonna
guys.
be in touch.
You're awesome.
Wonderful.
All right.
Join
Thank you.
join us on tomorrow, 8 p.m. All right, CET in Europe. All right, Central Europe time. It's 8 p.m. I don't know. I think you guys are 8 hours, 6 hours
6 hours
behind
from
us.
you. Yeah.
If you can make it, we do a reminder tomorrow again. and join us. All right. So we'll be
All right.
so we can to see if we'll have 60 people at least.
All
All
right.
right, guys.
Don't be
Thank
nice
you so much.
together.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
guys. Thank you so much.
Thank